Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to the Lehigh Valley Church. As I get set up here, I have multiple things containing liquid up here because I kind of just left it, so I'm going to switch that around. Good morning, anyone who's new and visiting us in the Lehigh Valley Church. Big welcome to you. We're glad to have you here. My name's Pickrel. As kind of what's been said, my wife and I, we get to serve the amazing campus ministry here at the Lehigh Valley Church, and we're very honored, I think, to serve that ministry because it's a generation of people who have done some amazing things, like making open-toed shoes and socks a fashion statement right now. It's what they wear. Camille even tried on a pair of mom jeans at Old Navy a couple weeks ago just to see what it was like. She was inspired by this generation. I asked her beforehand if I could say that. But anyway, this upcoming school week or week is a big one for the campus ministry. It's an opportunity that we get to go out and love this generation, love the students that are coming back. And we're very honored to do so. So with that, we're going to be continuing today in our sermon series of teleios, which is the word matured. And we've kind of made a little transition where we've kind of left the book of Hebrews and finished that, and now we've been reading through the book of 1 Timothy. And we've kind of switched gears a little bit where we are now kind of focusing instead of what is maturity individually or personally, but now what does it look like collectively as a church to grow and to become more and more in the ever-increasing glory, image of Jesus. And so we'll be in 1 Timothy. We're going to be reading in verses 18 through 20 this morning. And before we go there, let's go ahead and go to God in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, God, I thank you for this morning that we can come before you and worship you because you're a God that is worthy of our praise. And God, I do pray as we go to your word, I pray that you really allow whatever you want us to see, that we can see it. And that, God, that each of us may become more equipped and willing to make you known across the valley and also just fall more in love with you. God, we love you. We pray all these things in your awesome name. Amen. And as we get over there, the title of today's lesson is Faith and a Good Conscience. And we're going to be starting in verse 18, and it reads, Timothy, my son, I am giving you this command in keeping with the prophecies once made about you, so that by recalling them, you may fight the battle well. Hold on to faith and a good conscience, which some have rejected and have suffered shipwreck in regard to the faith. Among them are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have handed over to Satan to be taught not to blaspheme. And so let's stop there. Let's kind of work through this passage bit by bit. In the very beginning, Paul is giving a charge to Timothy I am giving you this command in keeping with the prophecies once made about you. And just a little disclosure, what that kind of means is it gives a little more clarity later on in the book of Timothy. The prophecies made about Timothy, or when the elders in the church in Ephesus laid their hands on him, this was essentially just like a sending off to go and do ministry, to go and to be an ambassador for Christ. And it was kind of like more in an official way. He was being sent off to be a leader, to kind of fan in the flame this gift of leadership that God gave him. And they kind of prayed over him. There was no prophecy about him. It wasn't like, there will be a prophet among you, and his name will be Tim. There's no prophecy. He's being sent off to be a leader. That's kind of what's happening here. And he's given this charge by Paul to recall this command, all these things I've said, what you have learned from me, so that you may fight the battle well. And then what he says is to hold on to faith and a good conscience. And so we're going to kind of work through that a little bit. So what does it mean to hold on to faith? That Timothy has been called by Paul, fan this flame that he's been given, and to be an ambassador. And we can actually all hold to this. Like, that's actually something we're all called to. Not everyone's called to the leadership capacity Timothy was, but we're all called to go and to be part of God's great ministry of reconciliation, where he is kind of bringing back his lost children and bringing them back into his fold, that we are all participate in this. And he says the hold to the faith. And so what is this faith a little bit? I think a great description we can actually find in the letter to Ephesians. So this church where Paul is in Ephesus. In the book of Ephesians in chapter 3, you can turn there or you can read behind me and listen. It says in chapter 3, verse 12, in him and through faith in him, we may approach God with freedom and confidence. I ask you, therefore, not to be discouraged because of my sufferings for you, which are your glory. For this reason, I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derive its name. And I pray that out of his glorious riches, that he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all of God's holy people, the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and how long and how deep, I missed one, how long? High, thank you, this love of Christ, or is the love of Christ. And to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with the measure of the fullness of God. So what this is saying is, in him we can approach God with complete confidence, that collectively together we can learn just how insane this love is that God has for each one of us and as a church collectively. So I think that the reason God calls each of us to be his ambassadors, to be these people representing him, to show who he is to the world, to represent him, is because when we take part in this rescue mission, that we constantly have to show people and teach people and explain the faith. And all the while you're doing that, you're also kind of preaching it to yourself. You yourself are being transformed by this message. It reminds you of the most important thing. And somebody once said this, that, and this is true of all of us, that we are more sinful than we could ever know, but at the same time, that we are more loved than we could ever dare to dream. That this is what the gospel is. The danger of what was happening in Ephesus, when Paul's giving Timothy this charge to go and to replace these elders who were teaching falsehoods, who were kind of preaching false doctrine, the danger of what was happening was that they were kind of instructing and telling people to abstain from certain foods or to abstain from marriage. It was kind of a divisive thing where it was people were being separated into the knows and the know-nots. The people who kind of were with it, who had the correct knowledge and understanding, and those that weren't. And when this happens, they miss the very fact that all people share the same problem. Right. Sin, and we're all level at the foot of the cross. That we all ate the apple, but Christ climbed the tree, so that we didn't have to. And now that tree has become a tree of life to all but Jesus, to all but him. That now, because of Jesus, and Paul even says this, that Christ came to save sinners, just earlier in this verse. And these teachings, what these teachers are teaching, it's rerouting around that fact and saying, it's what you know. It's causing people to measure up, to posture. It's, do you know this? Are you aware of this? And when we forget the true heart of the gospel, that Jesus came to save sinners, we stop looking at people as equals. We stop having humility, the very thing. And people are kind of puffed up. This was said a few weeks ago, that these teachings puffed up the me while kind of demoting the we. And the church itself wasn't growing while people puffed themselves up. And ironically with the gospel, the crazy thing is that it's when our weaknesses and flaws and our sin is seen, when those things are exposed and out there and everyone just kind of sees them, it's when that the value of the gift actually has power. That the value of grace actually means something when we're also fully in touch with how much we need it. And so a great kind of way to think about this is Ebenezer Scrooge. Now, we've all seen the Christmas Carol, I hope. It's a Christmas story. It's really great. There's all these different kinds of versions. This Christmas, just look up the Christmas Carol if you've never seen it and watch one of the movies. But essentially, it's about a guy who's just like hilariously evil. There's nothing good about him. He's greedy, he's selfish, this Ebenezer Scrooge guy. He's more concerned about his money and what he has and all that kind of stuff rather than helping people who truly need it. And if you read it, it starts off pretty dark. Right? And then, as the story progresses, he's kind of taken by these three ghosts. It's a ghost story. And these ghosts kind of show him like a bird's eye view of the effects of his life on the world around him. And he sees how his greed and his selfishness it's hurt the people closest to him, his relatives. It's also hurt his coworkers, and he sees the real destruction that his life caused. And when that was in full view, when he saw it, and it's the darkest part of the movie, then he wants a second chance. He doesn't know if he's going to get it, and it's all kind of left at a cliffhanger until suddenly he wakes up and it's Christmas morning, and he was given a second life. And Ebenezer Scrooge, he doesn't kind of walk out and he's like, okay, well, this is a second chance. No, he becomes the most generous person. Like, it completely switches. As dark as he was, it flips, and he becomes somebody who is the most outstanding model citizen in all of London. That the size of him understanding how much he needed the gift, it was directly proportional to the effect of the gift. Another way to say it is, whoever has been forgiven much loves much. They love much more. And this is the heart of the gospel. Not what you know, not the new information. It's not these things that separate us. It's that we all need sin, or we all need forgiveness. And then when we see that, everything changes. All who believe and have put their faith in Jesus' work on the cross, turn from acts that lead to death, repent and are baptized for the forgiveness of sins and the seal of the Spirit. That is the gospel. That is the amazingness of the faith that we get a hold to. That's what Paul's talking about this. And he tells Timothy to hold on to this, to grasp onto it, to remember, to recall it constantly, and to come alongside others and help them figure that out. That is what he's saying to hold to. And then Paul doesn't stop there. He continues in the passage. He says to hold to the faith and a good conscience. The why. Why hold to a good conscience? It says, because some have neglected it, and so because of that, they have suffered shipwreck in regard to their faith. So what is that saying? That our conscience, we kind of all know what conscience is. It's the Jiminy Cricket, telling us what's going on. It's that kind of like internal mechanism that we kind of judge something, if it's good, if it's bad. Sometimes in cartoons, you'll see it's like the devil and the angel on your shoulder, and they're like saying, do this. No, don't do this. It's that little voice that it helps us kind of determine what's good and bad. The idea of conscience has been around for a long time. Like even like Greek authors from like thousands of years ago, they were writing about this little internal mechanism. And so it's faith. If one way you could think about it is faith is kind of like the objective. It's kind of like that thing that is just true, that like I'm in need of grace and God has brought it my way if I so want it. That's just true. It's objectively true. And then conscience is more like the subjective me. Like, how do I now navigate my life in view of such a great gift? And how do I pursue it in a way that honors the gift? That's kind of like what conscience is. So since Paul brought up ships, speaking of ships, the compass, a great way to illustrate it, or not, the conscience, I'm sorry. The great way to illustrate a conscience is kind of like a compass. That on a ship, the compass was kind of like this indispensable tool because it pointed you what way was true north, what was east, what was west. Back in the day, you could kind of figure out like how to navigate the ocean through the stars and through different tools. But if you didn't have a compass, you would never know actually which way to go. Like you need something to help orient the map. Kind of like if you've ever like used Google Maps and you're pulling out of the grocery store, but you don't know which way to go. And sometimes the map is like flipped around. So you take the right, but you were supposed to take the left. If the map's not oriented, then the compass actually doesn't help you at all. So you need the compass to orient it. And so that's kind of like what conscience is. And it actually matters what direction you're going, kind of speaking even of a ship, as Paul was speaking to. Because if your direction is off by even just 1 degree or 2 degrees or 3 degrees, over the course of a 3-month, 4-month, 12-month journey on the water, you might actually end up hundreds of miles from the place you want to go. That's why the compass is so necessary to stay true to the course. And, and so Paul's relating this to our faith, that the faith, that it's taking us somewhere. But if we don't use the compass and the conscience, we might actually end up farther than we think this is actually taking us. That's kind of the illustration he's using. So our conscience is like that. So a good conscience doesn't just inform us what all things good. A good conscience, what Paul is referring to, it's one that's been informed by the gospel. That we actually can't, in and of ourselves, know it's truly good without the example of Jesus. Like, that's why Jesus is so important. When he lived the life to show us what the heart of the law and the prophets were, we need that example. And so in and of ourselves, we can't really know what is good. So why do we actually need the conscience? Like, what is really the reason? Because we as humans are really, really good at justifying ourselves and rationalizing our decision. And we can use and bend the needle of our conscience that something doesn't seem that good, but maybe in this light, maybe it's not that bad. You know, using Quizlet to get my answers on an assignment that I'm taking in school. I don't know, it's a small assignment, it's not a test, but it's not my work, therefore it's dishonest at best, but maybe stealing at worst, but, this is the last time, like, we can justify. I could say in a room full of Eagles fans, "Go Cowboys!" I could say that, and it's just a joke, but maybe it's discord, or it's just a game, who really cares, but maybe it'll hurt someone. We can bend and navigate our consciences kind of at will sometimes, because we're really good at rationalizing things. It's really easy to rationalize in our lives and also minimize sin. That's the danger of it all. That's why we need this navigational equipment. So our conscience is necessary and helpful. And the main point, if there's anything you get from this morning, this is the big point, that a church that holds to the faith and a good conscience, what does that produce? I think it's a church that is transparent, that learns how to be a transparent church, also transparent in our lives. A church where each of us leads with our flaws, that we expose the sin, we expose the struggle in our life to each other and to trusted people. A church that looks to create opportunities to illuminate the dark parts of our lives so that we can also help others and shine a light into theirs. That a church that's transparent is a one that will actually have that Ebenezer Scrooge Christmas morning, that amazing response to grace, is also a church that learns to be open and expose our lives. And so the Bible speaks also, if you keep reading in Timothy and a few other letters, you can have a good conscience, but you can also have a bad conscience. That you can have a seared conscience is one illustration that's used. So what does that, and Paul will use that later on in the book of Timothy, what does a seared conscience actually mean? So what is seared? Think about this. Like, what is when you sear a steak? Like, what are you actually doing? You're placing this steak on a really hot surface in order to essentially create this delicious, amazing crust around the steak, this surface, and it's awesome. But why would you want to do that? Why do you want this crust on the steak? Because it traps in all the delicious and moist, sorry if you don't like the word moist, the delicious, this flavorful goodness. It gets trapped into the ribeye, it gets trapped into the New York strip or whatever kind of steak you're into. And so searing a steak is an awesome thing. That is a good sear. But a seared conscience is a detrimental thing. That what does that mean when you sear a conscience? It means that all of what's inside stays there, and it just gets trapped, and it doesn't move and permeate and leave the surface like an unseared steak. So when we're all sealed off, and we don't actually let people know what's going on here and put it out in the open, it limits the amount that God's grace can actually change us. It limits how we can actually love people in the way that the gospel demands by its great value. This happens when we minimize and disregard sin, rather than get open about it and expose it to people we trust, and get thoughts on it and put it out there. It happens when we don't talk to people about misunderstandings and we just keep them to ourselves. And we're like, time will take care of it. And time never takes care of it. It happens also instead of asking and clarifying questions in a disagreement or a conflict, we assume the worst without first doing the love thing, which is assuming the best, giving benefit of the doubt and seeking clarity. That when we keep it to ourselves, and you do that long enough, a conscience can be seared. And this disclaimer, a seared conscience doesn't happen at like one decision, and like suddenly, oh my gosh, I have this bad conscience. It's a development of time. And it is dangerous because at one point, if you don't listen to your conscience long, or if you don't listen to your conscience over a long period of time, soon you might just not listen to it at all. And that is the danger of having a conscience like that. A church that holds to faith and a good conscience, it fights to be transparent in our personal lives, in our marriages, in our friendships, in our families. And why? It's not to be more righteous. Confessing and being open and transparent doesn't make you holy, it doesn't make you pure, or it doesn't make you more saved. It's only by seeing and shining a light into our lives and flaws that the true transforming power of the gospel takes root. So it doesn't make us holy, it is the response. It is so that God can do something incredible for us if we choose to get it in the light. There's nothing more powerful, I think, than seeing a sin that once ruled us be rendered powerless. Turn over to Ephesians 5 really quick. You can read it on the screen behind me, or if you're really good at flipping your Bible, go there real quickly. Ephesians 5, verse 11, it says, and this is Paul speaking to the same church he's speaking where Timothy is, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It is shameful even to mention what is the disobedient do in secret. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and that everything that is illuminated becomes a light. That when sin is exposed and thrown out there, it loses its power. Satan, the greatest tool for him, or the greatest victory for him, is that whatever's bothering us, or the thing that's in our life, when it stays there, that's the greatest victory for Satan. There's another verse in the Bible that talks about not giving, it's in the book of Ephesians, not giving the devil a foothold. And what does that mean? What is a foothold? It's something that holds your foot. It's a little piece of something that gives you an opportunity to kind of, maneuver. And so a foothold, like a great example is back in World War II, Normandy Beach was kind of the area that all of the Allied forces, that if we could just get to this one beach, then we can do something in this war. And so it was just one beach, though. It was just one tiny little beach. But from that one place, they were able to take the rest of Europe and take the rest of the war. And a foothold is like that. If Satan can get just a little piece, just that small compromise in our conscience, in our lives, that's fair game. He's able to launch something even bigger. And so when we expose it, when we get things out in the open, sin loses its power. And so recently, over the summer, I've kind of, so in my life, one of my areas I've had to mature and grow is being a man of self-control in my finances. And so over this summer, I have not paid as much attention to my spending habits as I normally would and maybe have in the past. And so I got to the point that on a credit card, and as Camille and I are life, where we're working to kind of pay down debt, that's kind of just where we are in our journeys. But I wasn't paying attention over the summer, and with travel and all the things that were happening, and then just going around, I started actually spending a little bit more on this card than I expected. And then I didn't look at it. I didn't go back and double check it. And so now by the end of the summer, I've gone back to the card, and I'm like, I'm putting us back in the hole. It's like, this is not good. And the other day, we had a little finance talk where we get together and we kind of just talk through where we are and like where we're going. And I was kind of thinking for a second that, oh man, I should probably tell her about this. I should probably say something. But I could also, just make some extra money on the side and do that. And then maybe I'll tell her in a month after I pay it, after it's all done. And then I'll mention it to her. And I was like, oh don't know. I was like, but I spent it, so it's kind of my thing. So do I really need to tell her? But I was like, no, it's our money. And I kept wrestling back and forth. Do I say it? And I did. I was like, you know what? I probably, if I'm going to be a transparent person, if I'm going to actually, if it's our money anyway, then I probably need to tell her. And I think that deep down, I was like a little bit afraid. I was like, kind of like, oh man, what's she gonna say? And I told her, and we were in a diner at the time, and she didn't throw her omelet at me, and she didn't storm off, and she didn't yell or get angry. She said, oh, okay, well let's just figure out how we're gonna pay that down now. I think in our lives sometimes we can be kind of fearful. What are people gonna think? What are they gonna say if I say this? The power of the gospel, when we're transparent. Just like in this verse, that when sin gets shined onto, it says that it gets illuminated and becomes a light. It actually becomes something that's a source of light itself. That transparency just breeds more transparency. Someone who has had something told to them that maybe they thought no one ever talks about, they suddenly are emboldened. Oh my gosh, I'm also right there with you. I struggle with that too. Transparency breeds transparency, and it breeds life. It's something we need. And the amazing thing about God is that he already knows you. He knows everything you've done. Think about this. This is a great kind of thought experiment. Think about the worst thing that you think you've ever done. That sin, that fit of rage, that deception, that hurt that you may have done. Just think about that for a moment and think about that time in your life when that happened. In that same very moment, God looked at you and said that you were worth dying for, that you were worth giving everything for. God, there's no secret with God. He knows our lives already. He already knows that nothing surprises him in our lives. When we expose it, we can heal, and it becomes a light. And the thing is, God knows it. Just like Camille and her response, she didn't go belligerent, but she said, okay. No, she didn't seem surprised, which I don't know what that says. She didn't seem surprised, and we worked on it. This is God in each of our story. He knows us, yet he said that we were still willing to give everything with the hope that we would then turn and live for him and find where true life really is. My call for everyone this week, if there's anything in your life that weighs on your conscience, that sits there, what's it going to look like this week to take a step toward exposing, to allowing the gospel to actually have a true effect on it and bring it to light? And if you've been around for a while, if you've been a Christian and living this way, are there any areas in your conscience where maybe you've been justifying, or you've been kind of bending the needle of the compass without true exposure and getting it out there and working on it? With that, church, glory be to God. I hope everyone has a great Sunday. I invite worship up for one last song before we close.